The show that started it all, Mobile Suit Gundam, the OG. It's been about 10 or so years since I've watched this series all the way through, and honestly, it's just as good as I remember. Is it perfect? No, nothing is, but it is fantastic and still stands the test of time. The basic premise of the show is that in the future, humanity has expanded into space and lives in space colonies. A collection of these space colonies, called the Principality of Zeon, decides to start a war for independence against the Earth Federation, and they use these new weapons called mobile suits, which are the giant robots. Despite being outnumbered, the Zeon have the upper hand because of these mobile suits. The Earth Federation build a prototype suit called the Gundam, and a brand new ship called the White Base, all of which are piloted and crewed by teenage refugees. And now we follow the crew of the White Base as they are being chased by the Zeon as they head to Earth and try to get to Earth Federation headquarters. That's a very basic premise, but the story is much more in-depth than that. The thing that is still so strong about this show is the story and the characters. So the main character is Amuro Ray, the pilot of the Gundam. He's a 16-year-old boy who has been thrust into the pilot seat to defend his friends and the White Base crew. Amuro's character arc is very interesting to watch. At first he pilots the Gundam out of necessity, out of a need to save people. But as time goes on, he and some of the other refugees who have taken up residence in the White Base are very hesitant to be called soldiers, as they don't want to be part of the war. They'll wear the uniform, they'll do the daily tasks on the ship since there is literally no one else to do it, but it really takes them a while to realise that they are now soldiers, whether they like it or not. But when Amuro realises this, he kind of becomes cocky. He thinks he knows better than everyone else simply because he's practically unbeatable in the Gundam. But he gets a sobering dose of reality when he goes up against an ace pilot called Ramba Rao, who tells him that the only reason he is winning is because of the Gundam and not because of his skills. And it's after that he grows up, I feel. He fully takes on the responsibilities of his position and he starts to respect the other crew members, especially the chain of command. And every now and then Amuro will comment that it's weird how everyone really has become soldiers and that their normal mundane lives are just totally gone. And I really enjoy that about the show because arguably another main character of the show is the White Base itself. It's the home of our heroes and we watch as they are thrust into the war and are trying to figure things out. The majority of the actual crew of the White Base died at the start of the show in a surprise attack by the Zeon, leaving only junior officers and new recruits to take up the more senior roles. And now the rest of the regular crew roles have to be given to the survivors of the colony attack, and they're all about 16 years old, like Amuro. Seeing everyone being taught how to use the communication desk, or how to load missiles, or how to man the machine guns is very interesting. It's such a small detail, but it adds to the authenticity of the situation. It adds to the sense of urgency. You know, some characters are basically told, hey, I know you just watched your entire family be blown up, but I need you to stitch up that guy over there, otherwise he'll bleed out. Okay, good, now I need you to man the machine gun on the port side. It just adds to the realness of the situation. In fact, I think it's one of the characters, I think Sailor or Frau Bo says to somebody else, like they ask him to do something, and he's like, oh, I've never done that before. And he's like, hey, figure it out, that's how we do things here on the White Base. If we don't figure it out, then we die. And I just love that harsh reality. Another situation happens early on with Amuro. In his first battle, he takes out two enemy Zaku's, which are the enemy giant robots. He takes out two Zaku's with little effort or thought. But soon after, like maybe 40 minutes in real time, he is chasing down enemy soldiers who escape into space. He has a clear shot of them, but he is hesitant. He's hesitant because he is targeting actual people. The Zaku's were dispatched without a second thought, but that's because he had that layer of separation from the human pilot. He wasn't fighting a person, he was fighting a machine, he was fighting a robot. But to see him in essentially the exact same situation and see him hesitate is great because it sets the tone for the show. It asks the audience, how do you feel at 16 years old to be thrust into a situation and be asked to kill another person? And that's the sense of realism and reality that makes Mobile Suit Gundam such a great and interesting watch. It really takes the premise of war and handles it seriously, but it's just telling it through the medium of anime. To see these characters that you fall in love with go from saying, oh, I can't do this, I'm just a civilian, to slowly turn into these battle-hardened veterans who fully understand the situation that they're in and take on that responsibility, it's just fantastic and rewarding to watch. And that's just the heroes. The villains of the show are just as interesting. The main villain is Char, someone who is just such a badass to watch. Char is everything you want from a villain. He's smart, he's cunning, he's charming, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, he's an actual physical threat, but he also has his own demons that he wrestles with and has other motivations that are slowly revealed over time, just making him a really complex character. Char is by far the fan favourite of the show and the franchise as a whole, to the point where almost every spin-off show and sequel has a so-called Char clone in it, and you've probably seen references to Char in other anime media and not even realised it. So overall, the story and the characters are great and really fleshed out over the course of the series. The white base crew especially are the most interesting, and you really do end up caring a lot about them as the story goes on. And that's not even mentioning the world building that is shown. The world of Gundam, specifically the Universal Century timeline, the original timeline, is so fascinating and takes its time to flesh itself out, whether it be the different political and military organisations, the technology and how they advance over time, and just seeing how the war progresses just keeps you engrossed in the story. A good story will stand the test of time, and Mobile Suit Gundam, from all the way back in 1979, truly holds up and still feels as fresh as it did when it first released. The story and world building are top notch, the characters and their development are engaging, and the stakes and the tension always feels high. Saying all that, there are a few problems along the way. The pacing for the show, for the most part, is solid, but early on I feel as if the show was kind of struggling to find its footing, but it quickly gets over that and finds its stride. So like the first 6 episodes, there's little lulls here and there. And there are 1 or 2 subplots in some episodes that I really didn't care for, but those were in their own sort of self-contained one-off episodes that you can't just ignore. The one that comes to mind are the refugee mother and her child as they go off on their own to find her husband's hometown, but it's been bombed. Well, I didn't really care for that. Speaking of the refugees though, fuck me, I forgot how fucking annoying they are. Thankfully they are gone relatively quick, but in the time that they are there, they are some of the most selfish people I've ever seen in a show. And thankfully the show does call them out on that, so at least they're self-aware, and if that's the goal that they were going for, mission accomplished. But god, I hated those refugees. I would say the biggest hurdle for people getting into this show is sadly the dated animation. As you watch this, you're going to see a lot of animation inconsistencies, particularly with the Gundam when it fights. When people are animated, it's fine, but whenever it's action, you're going to notice it. But I would say try not let that put you off. If you limit yourself by things release date or how old they look, then you're kind of putting a cut-off date on yourself, and you're going to miss out on a lot of good stories. Like, I know somebody who doesn't watch anything from before 1990, and that's just insane to me. And I know people in work who don't watch stuff before 2005. Like, it's just insane to me. So don't do that. You're limiting yourself and you're cutting yourself off from good stories. But the story and the characters more than make up for the spotty animation here and there. But if the animation is something that is holding you back, first I'd say get over it. But seriously, I would consider watching the 3 compilation movies instead, as they have much better animation because they had more time and they had a better budget. It's still in the same style, but the actual quality of the animation itself is better. The soundtrack is cheesy, but I forgot how much I love it and how the battle themes are just ingrained into my memory. They do a good job, but they are very much of the time, and I'm a dub guy. I prefer to watch anime in dub, mostly, and Gundam is one of those anime that I will always watch in the dub if it's available. If it's not available, then I'll watch it, but if the dub is there, I'm going to watch the dub. The opening song is just super 70s anime sci-fi cheese. It's got its own charm to it, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. But the ending theme is actually one of my favourites of all time. I really love it. It's just a nice somber piece that just has this happy, uplifting conclusion to it. It's just really good. I just love the ending theme. And there was one thing I noticed when I was rewatching this. There must be different cuts of this show. I originally have the DVD collection from the early 2000s, and that's the only version I've watched. But for this, I watched the Blu-ray collection from the folks over at Anime Limited, and there were certain scenes added that I've never seen before, and little bits of dialogue were different here and there. Nothing drastically different, but noticeable. One example is Amuro giving a mini presentation to the crew in General Revo about the G armor and how it's kind of limited, and that's when they get to Ireland. I've never seen that scene before. It was just a brief scene. It was before the episode's title came up, but I was just so surprised. I was like, whoa, I've never seen this before. It was a nice wee addition because it actually calls out the G armor and how kind of shit it is. I'll talk more about the G armor when I talk about the movies, when I reviewed the movies, but it was just a nice wee scene that I liked. One thing that was different that I didn't like in this cut was this new battle theme that was added, and it would play sometimes. It only played like 3 times, but it just has this awful electric guitar wah-wah pedal effect on it. It's just fucking horrible. It just assaults your ears. Like I said, it's rare. 3 times I think it shows up, but it is just impossible to ignore when you hear it, and it kind of just takes you out of it. You're just like, oh god, what is that? Who approved that? That's just fucking awful. But despite those technical limitations of when it was made, the story is still solid. Story is king, as they say, and Mobile Suit Gundam still wears its crown with pride. So, if you're a Gundam fan who's never seen the original, but are a fan of some of the later shows such as Gundam 00 or Iron Blooded Orphans or Witch from Mercury, I would recommend this. If you are a mecha fan but have never dipped your toes into the Gundam franchise because it just seems so vast and daunting, I would recommend this. If you're a sci-fi fan, I would recommend this. And if you're just someone who appreciates a good and well told story regardless of its genre and age, I recommend this. Mobile Suit Gundam, an oldie but a goldie, and still one of my favourite anime series of all time. Yeah, so that's my review of Mobile Suit Gundam. Absolutely love it. Still amazing. I'm so glad I've rewatched it. I can't wait to keep watching the others. What do you think of Mobile Suit Gundam? How highly do you rank it? What things do you like? What things do you don't like? What version do you prefer to watch? Do you prefer to watch the show or do you prefer to watch the movies? But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.